cornerstone of the problem for humanity and planet Earth is global melting, or warming, or climate change, or whatever you want to call it. But the facts, and I used to blame my generation. My generation has to take responsibility. It happened on our watch. Okay, we have the intelligence today to know what's going on. Okay, we know what's happening to the planet. I used to be much harder on my generation, but the longer I did research and the more research that we got, I realized, oh my God, we didn't see it coming. It's hard to blame somebody for something that they didn't know was happening, and we didn't know. It happened so goddamn fast. And that's important, because it's happening even faster now, and it's your generation that has to deal with it. Now, part of the presentation, I don't go into the detail here tonight because we don't have enough time, but part of the presentation I say this is an optimistic presentation because one other piece that you're going to see a lot of bad stuff here, but one piece that I'm not going to get into great detail, but I'll put a section of it on the table. You are not only the smartest generation in the history of humanity, and I'm not doing that to blow smoke up your jeans, you just are, okay? Right? You just are. Not necessarily because you've all figured it out, although you've figured a lot of things out, but it's because the capacity to change has never been greater. The knowledge in humanity today has never been greater. Today, we double knowledge every 7 years. Okay, 1900, we doubled it every 100 years. 1945, we doubled it every 25 years. Today, it's every 7 years. 7 years from now, it'll be every 12 hours. So it's 6:15 at night, 6:15 tomorrow morning. Every piece of knowledge, science, computer, everything. The technology is such, artificial intelligence is such that we are going to double every 12 hours. So at this time tomorrow night, we will have doubled it twice. Now, you can't tell me that the knowledge that will double every 12 hours does not have a goddamn solution to global warming, to get rid of carbon, to turn it into something that works. But that's not the problem. The problem is political will. The problem is the oil companies have the world where they want it. And if we want to keep the head in the sand, we want to let the deniers have their voice. We want and I'm going to show you in a second why the oil companies have such a foothold, how much it's worth. And I'll say something else that's going to, and I hate the oil companies, but I'm going to say this, I don't blame them. If I had what they had, I'd probably do it too, even though I'd want you to check me into an institution and say I've lost my goddamn mind. But I get why they're doing it. We have to have political leadership and leaders like you that find that alternative and get them off that now. Let's start. Now I could start any place, but you got to start someplace. And so I tried to start relatively close to today, although I can update this even with, it came out last week that March was the warmest month in the history of humanity. So we could add that in. But let's just start painting the destructive role that global warming is playing. Let's just start putting things on the canvas, paint on the canvas as to what's happening. On February 27th of 2018, the temperature at the North Pole was 50 degrees Fahrenheit, 50, not 5, right, 50, 30 degrees Celsius above normal. That doesn't happen, right? 5, you would have went, well, that 5's a little weird, that's a little warm, what the hell's going 50, okay? It was 35 degrees when it normally would have been 15 degrees below zero, and oh, by the way, it wasn't because the sun was extra warm that day, there was no sun. That was February 27th. The sun did not rise in that part of the world until the 20th of March. So in complete darkness, 50-degree difference. In Central Arctic, the temperature spiked to its highest level ever recorded in 2018 and 17, highest levels ever. Again, you know this stuff. This is just a compilation where you just pound and pound and pound. You know these things singularly. I want to put them all in one place. And I want to paint a picture that says, when you watch this, and you listen to this, groups around the world, you can't tell me that you, with a straight face, can say the world is going to survive this. So we better figure it out. We better quit denying. So, Greenland thawed for the first time. Why does that matter? A lot of methane gas under that permafrost come into that here in a little bit more. 2016, 17, 18 saw record heat levels worldwide, each year topping the last, and 2019 is well ahead of the pace already. It's going to be another record warm year. There have been 200-year droughts in the Brazilian rainforest in the past 9 years. 100-year drought means 100 years, not 4.5. The problem when you have droughts in the rainforest is trees die, they don't live. And those trees that produce 25% of the world's oxygen, when they die, they don't produce oxygen. What do they produce? Carbon. So double whammy. And then we get President Bolsonaro, who gets elected down there and says the rainforest is an economic opportunity. Going in the exact opposite direction for the mining industry, the cattle industry, and the logging industry. Okay? All right, and by the way, we're getting a lot of evidence, a lot of scientific studies. You guys familiar with this one? This is about 5 years old now. Anybody hear of this study? Yale University scientists. It's not Harvard, but it's Yale. Pretty good university. They had a group of scientists that said all the models for global warming in the history of science so far have looked at the history of humanity as one unit of time. And let's just look at the entire history of the world, what's going on with global warming. Well, these guys had an interesting proposition. They said, but what if the world heats differently in different eras? Like we're at the end of an ice age. What if with this amount of carbon, the Earth would heat differently? Did they find a finding that should scare the hell out of us? They said, yeah, actually, it looks like at the end of an ice age, yes, in the history of the world, maybe 2 degrees by the end of the century, maybe 4, we should at least double that. Maybe quadruple. Okay, these degrees get interesting real fast when you look at the consequences. Science says that for every degree of Earth's warming, crop yields drop by 10%. Okay, we're already right at 2, just approaching 2. Okay, that since we've started really monitoring this in modern times, it's risen 2. So with a planet that's growing, although that's going to change, we'll get into that in a minute, we're running out of food. And every time that the Earth's temperature keeps rising, we can't grow food. Okay? This is the study I was talking about earlier. Totally by accident. A few years ago, a group of investors, okay, Wall Street investors, went to the London School of Economics and they said, we're trying to gauge the value of stocks. Okay? But it's hard to gauge if we don't know what capacity they have. So ExxonMobil has all these leases for oil, but what's that mean? How much oil is there? I mean, what could that lease actually be worth? Well, the London School figured it out. They said, they estimated that there's 2,700 gigatons worth of oil and natural gas, fossil fuel left on planet Earth. The estimated value of those 2,700 gigatons was $27 trillion. And that's what I was saying earlier. If you had $27 trillion buried in a coffee can in the backyard, you'd dig it up. I'd spend it. But I'd sure as hell cash it. And that's what they're doing. They're going to get it. 27 trillion. They have to honor the shareholders. Oh, shareholders, by the way, we're sitting on a ton of money, but we're killing the damn planet. Let's drop your stock a little bit. You're okay with that, right? Should we save the planet? No, you're fired. Go get it, sell it, burn it, so I can make some cash. Well, here's the problem. For every 565 gigatons of that fossil fuel that we burn, the Earth's temperature rises 2 degrees. Well, I do my math. I went to undergrad in South Dakota, so maybe you might want to check the math. But it looks like about 10 degrees there. Does that matter? Yes. Science is pretty consistent, pretty uniform, that if the Earth's temperature rises 6 degrees, we're dead. The oceans at 6 degrees will die. There won't be a thing living in them. Okay, we'll come to that in a little bit. So 10 degrees, if we go get it. Now remember, the Yale University study said 8 looks like it's in the forecast. Okay? So we're getting there. All right? Well, throw some more on the table. In ice pack levels recorded the lowest level ever recorded in 2018. Science now says ice pack will be completely gone by the summer of 2030. Has anybody here been to Glacier National Park? In the United States, Glacier National Park was named because it used to have glaciers. A couple centuries ago, it had 150. 10 years ago, it had 11. They're virtually now all gone. I know my son worked there, and he said it's strange because it's Glacier National Park and there's no glacier. January 2019 study showed the world's oceans are warming 40% faster. Not 4 you'd go, what in the hell, 40 in 5 years. What's going on? 2018 was the warmest year on record for the world's oceans. A few years ago, the head of the U.S. Navy in the Pacific Fleet spoke at MIT. And when he was down, a student raised her hand and said, "Admiral, what's the greatest threat to the United States?" He said, he didn't stop and go, well, he went, global warming. And the student said, no, I meant like North Korea, Russia, whatever. And he said, the Admiral said, you asked me the greatest threat. And the student said, yeah. Well, he said, it's global warming. And the student said, are you an environmentalist? He said, no, I had a $1 trillion Navy with 117 bases that are going to be underwater, and we don't have any money to move them to higher ground. So I'm going to have a $1 trillion Navy that's rendered useless because the damn oceans are rising. We can't afford to build new bases. The military gets it, why don't politicians? All right, well, so let's keep going. What's going on here? We used to have something, you probably have heard of the term, okay, but the term doesn't exist anymore. It's a little term called permafrost. By definition, you guys are Harvard students, so I guess I have to educate you because you all think there's something called permafrost, which means something's permanently frozen. Well, we don't have such a thing on planet Earth anymore, okay? The Arctic permafrost contains, by the way, and it's thawed, 1.8 trillion tons of carbon, more than twice that's currently in the Earth's atmosphere. When that permafrost melts, that stuff rises. There's another problem. It's actually a little bigger than just the permafrost. When it thaws and is released, the carbon evaporates as methane, not burned carbon, not burned fossil fuel, methane, raw. That methane gas is 86 times more powerful than greenhouse gas carbon. 86. We should burn the damn stuff. We'll die a few years later. But 86% more in greenhouse gas when it's released in its raw form. And that's what's, you can go in Russia, anybody traveling in Siberia, there are holes miles wide that the methane is pouring out of them. It used to be frozen, not frozen anymore. It's one of the reasons science, we're going to come to a statistic here in a second, is blown away by how they misjudged just a few years ago how rapidly the Earth was warming. They did not account for this methane gas. In July of 2017, a 1 trillion-ton iceberg, 5,800 square kilometers, calved from Antarctica, causing maps to be redrawn. It was so big, they literally had to redraw maps of the world, because what used to be ice is now water. And ice, technically, for map drawers, is land. Such a big piece, they had to redraw maps of the world. In July 2018, the largest crack ever recorded in Antarctica icebergs was discovered. And folks, you know this, you can't pick up the paper almost any day and you get another one of these reports. It is mind-numbing how quickly this has happened. Okay, go to the next one. This one was also, there's so many of these, that's what's amazing about this. That if there was one of these studies or one of these facts, you'd be alarmed. It's one after another after another. The United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, considered kind of the gold standard of studies on climate change, of scientists on climate change, now projects a 4-degree rise by the end of the century, but warn it could go to 8. Remember, you guys are too young probably, but about 6, 7, 8 years ago, 2 degrees end of the century, probably not, maybe outside shot, no way in hell, but possibly we should watch it. 4 degrees, absolutely. 8 degrees, and remember, oceans die at 6 degrees. Okay? So if at the end of the century it only got to 6, and you guys with modern medicine, most of you are probably damn near will be alive at the end of the century, but the planet won't be. That's a problem. Okay? With a 4-degree rise in temperature, science says oceans could rise 260 feet. 4 degrees. Not 6, not 8. 4 degrees. I don't know if you saw this in the paper a few months ago. 2050, it's now projected Miami will be underwater. It'll actually be dead in the next few years because their water supply is so contaminated they can't figure out how to spend all the money that would have to move all the water into those millions of people. Okay, because the sea's rising and it's contaminating all of their natural water, the fresh water supplies. If any of you are from Bangladesh or have been to Bangladesh, I've done work in Bangladesh. Bangladesh by 2050 will no longer exist. Its 167 million people will be on the move because there will not be a Bangladesh, it'll be underwater. The 267 million people live in Indonesia, while Indonesia is not projected by 2050, but I'll bet it will be in the next few years, that it's going to be so much underwater that a significant portion of those 267 million, if not all of them, because the government will collapse. They cannot afford, there's no infrastructure, there's no way to feed, there's no way to bring basic services, so the odds are pretty good. That will be an abandoned country, and those people will move. Okay, see where we're going here. We'll come to this in a little bit more. Think of it this way. 80% of the human population lives within 80 miles of a coastline. All the most valuable property, all that money, all that infrastructure. If science is right, let's say they're half right. Let's say they're a quarter right. Let's say they're 10% fricking right. 26 goddamn feet. Boston's gone. New York's gone. I mean, the seaboards are gone. The federal government, they're going to come in and move all those people. They're going to build those roads. And State Farm's going to come in and write you a check. Don't bet on it. Don't plan on it. It's not going to happen. They're not saying 26, which would be a worldwide disaster. They're saying 260. September 2018, study showed that human activity pumps 9 billion tons of carbon into the atmosphere every year, but forests and oceans, ocean waters can only absorb 5 billion tons, and now with the warming of the oceans, we got even a bigger problem. This number's only going to get worse. Go to the next one. Thank you. Get this. I mean, you see where I'm going, right? You know why people line up and they say, I'm sorry, I can't tell you wrong. That should scare the living hell out of us. But it keeps going on. In the last 40 years, half the world's animal population has disappeared. Half. If I sat here as a Harvard educator and said to you, over the last 400 years, we've lost half of the animals on planet Earth, you would say, we got a crisis. If I said to you, as a Harvard professor, we lost half the animals on Earth in the last 4,000 years, you'd say, we got a problem. If I said 40,000 years, you'd say, we got a problem. 40 years. Nearly half, about 43% of the world's insect population has disappeared. Ecosystems are gone. I don't know how we're going to pollinate crops, so we'll have to figure that out. But if we're losing 10% of crop production with every 1 degree rise in temperature, maybe it's not going to matter. Look at this one. We've had the worst spate of die-offs on planet Earth since the loss of the dinosaurs 65 million years ago. Listen to what's happening here. The normal species extinction rate is normally 1 to 5 species per year. It's something called the background rate. This is, the number I'm going to give you here is the most conservative number I could find. That is, most scientific studies say the background rate, the number of species going extinct, is way higher than what I'm putting here. But think, this is the most conservative one I could find. It says several dozen are going extinct every day in the world. Not 1 to 5 a year, every day. The rate of extinction is estimated to be 1,000 times, headed toward 10,000 times the background rate. At this rate, half of all remaining species on Earth will be probably distinct in 30 years. We know that 99% of current threatened species are at risk because of human activity from a warming planet. All right, go to the next one. Of the remaining species, 45% of freshwater fish are imperiled, virtually half. They're not doing well, okay? How healthy are they? Well, there's part of global warming, part of this unfettered pollution, part of this, let's just pump this in, whether it's into the waters or into the air. I don't know if you saw this study. I put this in here selfishly. I apologize, but I lived on the Potomac River for 18 years. A few years ago, they found that 79% of Potomac River smallmouth bass, male smallmouth bass, had developed female sex organs. Dumping a whole lot of shit into that water, and it's causing problems. Okay? 45% of all the world's amphibians are in peril. That's a real problem. That's the canary they call in the coal mine. When amphibians go, we got problems. 40% of the world's bird population is in peril. 90% of the world's predator fish populations are already disappeared, already gone. 55% of the world's fish stocks are overfished. 70% of all plant species are threatened with extinction. 2019, that's where we're at. Go to the next one. There's a dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico, 5,500 square miles, 14,000 square kilometers, due to pesticide runoff. My home is right now is in South Dakota. My family is background is in farming. We can blame the farmers for using Monsanto. I blame the government. Farmers don't know. They put on their crops whatever the hell's available. What the hell are we doing? We know this is happening. We know we've got the technology that we could create something that would save our crops and not destroy our waters. We're just not doing it because Monsanto's got a lot of money. So we don't do it. Half the world's ponds, lakes, and estuaries are now significantly polluted. By 2080, Southern Europe will be in permanent extreme drought, as will parts of Australia, Africa, and South America. Oh, and by the way, the breadbaskets of China and the United States. And if you want to go ahead and build the Keystone XL pipeline, have at it. The Ogallala Aquifer that sits below it provides 42% of all water supplies to 8 states in the breadbasket of America. And you think Keystone XL ain't going to explode? Bullshit. We have another Keystone. Do you know that? You know there's more than one Keystone pipeline? It's already built. Same company. 40% of their iron ore comes from a company called Wellspun in India. It's a little less quality than what we normally would require, but the EPA allows it. In Keystone 1 that was built 10 years ago, they've averaged, not quite 10, about 8 years ago, they've averaged, when the Keystone folks went to the EPA, they said, our economic studies, our environmental study shows 1 leak every 7 years. In the first 3 years of operation, they've averaged 1 leak a month. Now, Keystone 1 is built not over the Ogallala Aquifer. Keystone XL would be. The Ogallala Aquifer, as we know, the same people that were building Keystone built the pipeline that exploded over the Kalamazoo River, an above-ground river that significant portions are still dead to this day, and that's 7-8 years ago that pipe burst. You pollute an aquifer, you're screwed. Can't clean an aquifer. Okay. But they're trying to build it, even though the Ogallala Aquifer, at some parts in Nebraska, sits 3 feet below the surface. Not 300, not 3,000, 3 feet. And these idiots want to build it. The company that has a license to build the pipeline is the same company using the same iron ore that is causing a leak a month on Keystone 1. In 2018, how many of you knew this? 20 million people died last year in Africa alone due to climate change. Manifested itself in starvation and disease, but it was climate change. Look at it this way. Australia has what? Who's here from Australia?
Just left Amy.
Amy. 30 million people or something. Maybe not quite that many. If everyone in Australia died this year, the world probably would pay attention. 20 million people die in Africa and the world goes, who gives a damn? Canary in a coal mine. They're human beings. I don't care where they live, who they are, but they're dying and the world doesn't know it and the world doesn't seem to care. Okay, go to the next one. There are other problems with global warming. Today, the science tells us 5 billion people can be sustained on planet Earth with some ease. Currently, we're at 7.5 billion. Estimates, although this number won't hold true, I'll tell you why in a second. Estimates are that we will be at 10 billion people by 2083, 50-some years. But we have a depletion of resources, food, water, land, natural resources of all kinds. We did have a report 2017, for instance, that said Africa had run out of farmland. Now, how do you run out of land? Well, you don't. Land stays where it is, but land that you can irrigate, land that has any minerals in it to grow a crop, they didn't have any more. I was on a panel about 3 years ago now in Greece. It was a panel on global warming. It had all these experts from all over the world. They invited me as someone who is an expert in communication. I don't know what that means, but I took them up on it and said, I'm happy to come to Corfu Island. And I'll try to tell you how you should, and this is what I told them, you better get this shit out there. Because nobody knows it. They estimated 4 years ago, or 3 years ago, there were 65 million refugees. That was the decided upon number. That's about what we have in the world. Nobody wants them. They don't want to be in the run. They'd rather stay home. They can't. Can't feed themselves. There's war. There's strife. There's Putin screwing around. And the U.S. and the EU doesn't have the guts to deal with him because they're buying cheap oil. Let's start with that. Angela Merkel. U.S. Let me give you another little number. The EU does 2% of their trade with Russia. 2, that's it. Nothing. Russia does 48% of its trade with the EU. EU wants to screw with Russia, tell them to quit jacking around in Syria, quit jacking around, destabilizing the world, and trying to create refugees to destabilize governments in Europe. We'll starve your asses out of existence. But you gotta have the guts to do it. We ain't doing it. You know what the estimate is by 2050? Some of you do, I know. How many refugees the planet will have? 30 years from now. 1.2 billion. And let's be real clear, nobody's going to take them, right? By 2050, hell, the world economy is going to be screwed. All these people are going to have to move. We just spent $40 million to move a little town off the Delta in Mississippi. The U.S. government did. It's an experiment. Well, as the waters rise, how are we going to move these people? Well, this little town, just a handful of people, 40 million. Good luck with that when you move in cities of 1 million people. Okay? 1.2 billion. Well, I'll let you in a little secret, all you religious people in the world, whatever your religion, they're going to die. And you don't give a damn. Because you're not doing anything about it. Totally related to global warming. We have a toxic planet. A friend of mine is a toxologist. She's one of the leading toxicology experts in the world. She got a call probably now 4 years ago, from the government in Russia saying they wanted her to come do a study as an expert on toxic substances in the human body. And as you know, toxic substances tend to, whatever it is, chemicals, they get into your fat, they get into your brain, they get into the soft tissues, and they're there, and they're killers, right? They're not healthy. So she went over and found, one of the reasons they wanted her to do the study was 70% of Russian youth could not pass the physical. Their bodies were too screwed up. Okay? And they said, how can we get these toxic chemicals out of their bodies? She said, you really can't. What you can do is not put them in it. So you better clean your act up environmentally. It's not just in Russia. Most of you don't know this. According to the Center for Disease Control, mercury poisoning. Right? Fossil fuel, we burn the fossil fuel, it gets up into in the form of mercury, up into the clouds, comes back in the form of rain, into our water, into the ground, gets into the food supply. Center for Disease Control estimates that 1 out of 3 pregnant women in the United States, 1 out of 3 today, will have mercury poisoning in that fetus that is above what they recommend for the health of that child. They're not saying it means we're going to have physical deformities or mental or emotional, but it's above what you should have for the health of that child. So you're going to have something. 1 out of 3 of the next generation. That's what we're looking at. Okay. I hate to say it, but I got a whole bunch more. But you get the idea. Now, Harvard doesn't have to divest. But it seems like the right thing to do. Harvard doesn't have to divest with their $40 billion. But I'm guessing there's other stocks that could make them some cash. Harvard doesn't have to do a damn thing, except it's the leading educational institution in the world and ought to lead by example. I get it, you don't do it overnight. But we're not idiots. The planet is dying overnight. So fine, stretch this out, Harvard. Do it over the next 50 goddamn years and see what we've got. But you're going to look like a chump. You could have laid down a marker. It's embarrassing. 40 billion. Shit, we got more money than half the countries in the world, and we can't get out of oil stocks. Are you kidding me? All these smart economists, hell, at the Kennedy School, they're getting rid of guys like me because I'm a practitioner because they want to hire economists. But we got all the best economists in the world. Figure out how to make some goddamn money off of stock. Do that. But get us off of oil. That's why Stephen Hawking, shortly before his death, basically gave up. Said, it ain't happening. Point of no return's been hit. You can't save it anymore. He said, the only thing you can do, find a new planet. You got about 100 years. Now, I disagree with Mr. Hawking, Dr. Hawking, in two areas. One, we have less than 100 years. Two, I think we can turn it around. We've got the knowledge. We're doubling it virtually overnight. Where's our political will? And governments have to lead. They got the money. They got the regulations. They have to get together and lead. And have a concerted effort to say, we're going to figure out what to do with that carbon. We're going to get it out. We're going to turn it into something good. But we're going to stop killing the planet. It starts, however, we got to wean ourselves off oil and quit burning it. Because that's the one common denominator that we know is killing this planet. So, scientific world says the sixth mass extinction in the past 500 million years is upon us. And for humanity, don't assume that somehow, with whatever crawls out of the next iteration, because I love that, if you've heard this saying, that nature bats last. I used to do a lot of environmental writing when I was researching this. I had an online newspaper and did a lot of stuff in the environment. There's a couple great articles that said, you can do what you want, world, right? You can screw up Mother Earth, you can screw up nature, but here's the problem. If any of you follow sports analogies, the last team to bat in a baseball game has an advantage. You get the last shot. And the title of one of the research articles that I read was, Nature Bats Last. And what they said in the article was, you can kill humanity. You're not going to kill Mother Earth. Mother Earth will regenerate itself in some fashion. Just don't assume that it'll regenerate itself with human forms. Okay? So, nature bats last. So, unless your generation reverses this trend, in the next generation, pretty good case to say it'll be the last generation. And I'm not prone to unsupported rhetoric. If I didn't believe this has happened, Lana said, if you want to come straight, say why? It's nothing good. We're okay. We got some issues. We'll figure it out. No, I know. I'm happy to come. Because this shit's happening right now. My hope is you. My hope is the next generation, your generation. But I'll end where I started, and I know I'm over my time, but I'll end where I started. My generation failed. I apologize for that. My excuse is, and I never used to give it to me, and I still don't like it, but we never saw it coming. That's not an excuse anymore. It's upon us. The good news is we have more knowledge than ever to figure it out. The question becomes, do students like you, do institutions like Harvard take the lead and say, divesting off oil? It's nothing. Small bone in the throat, spit it out, and move on. Set the example, lead the world. Because the clock's ticking. I mean, it's ticking. My hopes and my prayers are with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I mean this as an optimistic lecture. You cannot slay the dragon if you don't admit it's in the room. And too many people in the world are saying there's no dragon. It's just changing in the climate. It's natural. We'll be okay. No, admit that's the dragon. It's going to kill us. It's gonna breathe fire on us and burn us all to hell unless we kill it first. We now know there's a dragon, it is irrefutable. And it is ready to spit fire. Are we ready to push